Chapter 1, Mishnah 12. The next three Mishnahs discuss cases where Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel disagreed at first, but Beis Hillel later changed their mind and agreed with Beis Shammai. This Mishnah also appears in Yevamos, chapter 15, Mishnahs 2 and 3. These are the matters in which Beis Hillel retracted their original ruling and started to rule like the opinion of Beis Shammai. The first matter: if a woman went with her husband overseas and she came back from overseas and said, "My husband died," she is believed and she may remarry. Similarly, if her husband had no children and she said, "My husband died," she is believed and she performs yibum with his brother. Generally, matters that involve marriage must be decided based on the word of two witnesses. However, in order to make it easier for a woman to remarry after her husband dies, the sages ruled that she is believed to testify that her husband died, and she is allowed to remarry based on her own testimony. The above law was established as the result of the following incident. A man died from a snake bite while harvesting grain. His wife came to a nearby court and testified about his death. After verifying that he was indeed dead, the court gave her permission to remarry. As a result of this incident, the sages ruled that a wife's testimony about her husband's death is accepted. The Mishnah teaches that the details of this law were originally the subject of a dispute. Beis Hillel say, we have not heard that a woman is allowed to remarry based on her own testimony that her husband died, except when she comes from the grain harvest, that is, from a field near the city, and testifies that her husband died nearby. This is what happened in the case for which the sages established the law, and it is only in such a case that they approved the wife's testimony. If a woman testifies that her husband died overseas, though, she is not believed. Beis Shammai challenged Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai said to Beis Hillel, surely you agree that a woman is not only believed when her husband died exactly as in that particular case, namely at the grain harvest? Rather, it is clear that whether a woman comes from the grain harvest or whether she comes from harvesting olives, she is believed to say that her husband died, even though the law was instituted as a result of an incident in which a man died while harvesting grain. So too, even if a woman comes from overseas, her testimony is accepted. And the sages who established this law mentioned the grain harvest only because that was what happened. However, they meant to approve a woman's testimony about her husband's death no matter from where she comes. Beis Hillel then retracted their original ruling and began to rule like Beis Shammai. The Mishnah cites another matter in which Beis Hillel retracted their original opinion. When a man gets married, he writes his wife a document known as a kesubah, in which he guarantees that if he divorces her or dies before her, she will collect a sum of money from him or his estate. The Mishnah cites a dispute whether a woman who testifies that her husband died may collect this money based on her testimony. Beis Shammai say a woman who testifies that her husband died may remarry and she may collect her kesubah payment. Since she is believed that her husband is dead, she may collect her kesubah, which is a widow's right. But Beis Hillel say she may remarry, but she may not collect her kesubah payment. This is because the testimony of a wife is usually not valid testimony. The sages allowed us to rely on her testimony only in order to allow her to remarry. In order to claim the kesubah, she has to produce two valid witnesses that her husband is dead, as for every matter of monetary law. Beis Shammai challenged Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai said to Beis Hillel, you have permitted the serious matter of a forbidden relationship, i.e. allowing a married woman to remarry, based on her testimony. Will you not rely on it to permit the less serious matter of money, i.e. granting her the kesubah, if her husband is actually alive? Her remarriage is adultery, which is a forbidden relationship punishable by karas. Collecting the kesubah unlawfully involves only the less serious sin of theft. If we rely on her testimony to let her remarry, we should certainly rely on her testimony to let her collect the kesubah. Beis Hillel responded. Beis Hillel said to Beis Shammai, we find that even though we allow her to remarry, the brothers and the heirs of her husband cannot come into the inheritance of his property based on her word. They cannot inherit his property unless two valid witnesses testify that he is dead. Thus, it is clear that even though her testimony is relied upon to let her remarry, it is not relied upon for matters of money. Therefore, her testimony cannot be relied upon to collect the kesubah. In reply, Beis Shammai gave a different reason for their ruling that she can claim her kesubah based on her own testimony. Beis Shammai said to Beis Hillel, but we can learn from the text of her kesubah document that a woman may collect the money of the kesubah based on her own testimony. For her husband writes to her in the kesubah, when will you be eligible to marry another man? You may take what is written for you in this document. Thus, the collection of the kesubah depends on her ability to remarry. Since when she testifies that her husband is dead, she is given permission to remarry, she collects the ksuba as well. Beis Hillel then retracted their original ruling and began to rule like the opinion of Beis Shammai.